Hey everybody, welcome to No Script, No Problem on Believe, the #1 podcast network for professionals. I'm your host, Steve Berkowitz, and today I'm talking to Emmy award-winning filmmaker GEETA GANDBHIR about two of her recent projects. First up, Eyes on the Prize 3, which you can stream now on Max, and then The Perfect Neighbor, which just won the Directing Award for U.S. Documentary at the Sundance Film Festival and was recently bought by Netflix. GEETA is a visionary documentary director, producer, and editor who got her start working for the legendary Spike Lee. Oh, wait a minute. I just got a text, and now I'm on a group text with the Secretary of Defense and the National Security Advisor. I'm sure they're going to be bombing somebody, so no big deal. All right, back to the task at hand. After the interview, I'll talk about the conversation surrounding Netflix's hit show Adolescence. I'll break down the incredible TV we have going on right now that everybody needs to see. Then I'll discuss some of the woes that Hollywood is facing and what California is proposing we do about it. But first, I've got two quick stories to get to before I chat with GEETA. First up, I finally saw the Oscar-winning documentary No Other Land. Now, I put it off because it doesn't have American distribution, so it's not the easiest to find, but it is in some smaller theaters, and I'm so glad I saw it. You gotta be in the right mindset. I do warn you, this is a very serious movie. No Other Land follows the destruction of Palestinian villages in the occupied West Bank and chronicles the unlikely friendship between co-directors Abraham Yuval and Palestinian activist Basil Adra. The movie is shocking, it's powerful, and it's gut-wrenching. It's also beautifully shot and wonderfully told, despite the worst of circumstances for filming. At certain points, I could not believe that they kept filming during violence. The bravery and determination of the filmmakers is astonishing. I will never complain again about production issues, and I really encourage everyone to see it. Nevertheless, despite the Oscar win and the many accolades showered on the filmmakers, No Other Land co-director Hamdan Bilal, he was attacked by a group of armed settlers in the West Bank.
Yuval Abraham says his co-director Hamdan Bilal was beaten and was hurt in his head and his stomach. He also says soldiers got onto the ambulance he called.
Tuesday morning, Abraham, who co-directed No Other Land with Bilal, posted an update to say that Bilal had been released. He wrote, "After being handcuffed all night and beaten in a military base, Hamdan Bilal is now free and is about to go home to his family." The violence took place on Monday night in Bilal's hometown. The activist group Center for Jewish Nonviolence said later that day that after residents of the village encouraged a single settler to leave, dozens allegedly appeared and attacked a couple of homes, stealing security cameras and battering water tanks. The IDF offered a different version of events in its own statement on Monday, saying the violence in the village started after, quote, several terrorists hurled rocks at Israeli citizens, damaging their vehicles. No Other Land, directed by 4 filmmakers, 2 Israeli and 2 Palestinian, took home the prize for Best Documentary at the 97th Annual Academy Awards on March 2nd. Despite its Oscar win, No Other Land has yet to be picked up by a major U.S. distributor. Co-director Abraham has suggested that the lack of U.S. interest in picking up the project is due to the film's criticism of Israeli military and political actions.
I hope that they get American distribution, although I fear that our streamers are too scared. They should take a look at the courage of the filmmakers and learn something from them. Moving on, I'll be talking about the Sundance Film Festival in my chat with GEETA GANDBHIR, so I thought I'd do this story beforehand. Now, while she got to enjoy the Park City, Utah experience, future filmmakers will not.
Sundance Film Festival will officially leave Utah in 2027 for Boulder, Colorado. It's been held in the state now for more than 40 years.
The Sundance Institute said Boulder, Colorado has that small town charm with a vibrant art scene.
My hometown of Cincinnati, Ohio was a finalist to get the film festival. Unfortunately, the Sundance Institute went with Boulder. They said it was a, quote, thoughtful and thorough process, end quote. We'll always have the Bengals and the Reds. Okay, let's get to my interview with Emmy and Peabody award-winning documentary director, producer, and editor, GEETA GANDBHIR. Her credits and accolades are far too many for me to list off, but here are just a few. She was the editor of the Spike Lee-produced HBO documentary, If God Is Willing and the Creek Don't Rise, about life after Hurricane Katrina, which won the 2010 Peabody Award. GEETA directed and executive produced Born in Synanon, a documentary series for Paramount Plus revolving around the Synanon cult. And today, we're going to be focusing on two of her recent projects. The first is Eyes on the Prize 3, We Who Believe in Freedom Cannot Rest, 1977 to 2015. This is streaming now on Max. It's a 6-part documentary series that explores the aftermath of the civil rights movement that makes it very clear that the movement has never ended, just as its real concerns were never fully resolved. Eyes on the Prize 3 is an emotional, inspiring, and righteously angry series of vignettes that looks backward while very clearly intending to reflect upon and instigate conversations about our fraught current moment. And then there's GEETA's most recent project, the independent documentary The Perfect Neighbor, which is currently making a festival run and winning awards along the way. The Perfect Neighbor is a riveting, stylish feature doc that tackles the issues surrounding the controversial Stand Your Ground law following the deadly shooting of Adjika Owens in Florida. Utilizing extensive police surveillance and body cam footage, the film allows the circumstances of the incident to speak for themselves. The Perfect Neighbor has been commissioned by Netflix for a reported $5 million and is expected to appear on the streamer later this year. Okay, enjoy the interview. All right, GEETA GANDBHIR, welcome to No Script, No Problem.
Thank you so much for having me.
All righty, so you've got a lot going on right now. You have Eyes on the Prize 3, which is on Max and HBO, and you are on the big festival tour with The Perfect Neighbor. You know, did incredibly well at Sundance, and now you're going to South by Southwest and a couple other festivals. So how exciting is it right now for you with all these projects going on?
It's been honestly really incredible to see the reception, particularly of The Perfect Neighbor. Eyes on the Prize we've been waiting for it to come out. We actually finished it a while ago, and it was programmed for 2025, but I believe we finished it either early 2024. So, that one too, it's been long anticipated. And I have to say, Eyes on the Prize could not be more necessary right now. It's such a critical watch, particularly in this really tumultuous time. And Perfect Neighbor, again, it's a personal film in that Adjika Owens, who the film is really about, was a family friend. So I think for us, for myself and the team, there was something, that film is incredibly important and special. And for it to, and it was an independent film, and so to make it to Sundance, and then to have that type of reception really restored a lot of faith in the industry for me.
Definitely. And we both know how hard it is right now to do an independent film. And at the Oscars, it was great to see Honora and Sean Baker talk about independent film. And we saw No Other Land take home the Oscar, which is very encouraging. All right. But before we get into these projects, I want to talk a little bit about you and let you tell the audience a little bit about how you got here. Some of your influences, certainly working with Spike Lee. How did you get into this amazing world of film and television? What were some of your early influences? What made you want to be a director?
So it's been a long and winding road to get here, but I think, so the first film I ever worked on was Malcolm X back in the day. I started in scripted, and I met Spike Lee after I graduated from college. I was working as an animation assistant to an incredible artist, Suzanne Pitt, who is unfortunately no longer with us. She was my roommate at college's, one of my roommates' mother. And so I was working for her, and I met Spike Lee. She was based on the campus of Harvard University, and I met him there. He was teaching a class there, and I kind of badgered him into giving me an internship. I had seen Do the Right Thing in the theaters the year that it came out, and it really was life-changing to me. I'd never seen a film like that with that sort of, that power, that messaging, just the vision that it had. And he was one of my favorite filmmakers. He still is. And he gave me an internship. He made the connection between, I believe, I like to think this, between animation, which is, again, sequential art, and editing. So he gave me an internship in first put in the sound edit, and then I moved into picture editing. So that's my beginning. And I was in scripted for about 12 years in New York. And then I think after 9/11, a lot of the scripted work left New York, and I didn't want to leave. I wanted to stay. This is my city. I felt like I didn't want to abandon it. And I think I segued then into documentary. And I was an editor for a long time. And then for the last 15 years, I started directing. And I was really following in the footsteps of another mentor of mine, Sam Pollard, who is also now my business partner. We have a company. I have a company with Sam Pollard, Elisa Payne, incredible producer, myself, and there's a few other folks too in there. We have a company called Message Pictures. Sam was my mentor, and I watched him. He was an incredible editor. And then I watched him. He was also a producer, and I watched him start to direct. And my goal was to be like him. And then I figured out he doesn't sleep. That's like more drive than like anyone, and energy than like 10 people combined. And I'm so fortunate now to have a company with him and the team that I have. And the Perfect Neighbor is really the inaugural project, one of our inaugural projects of the company, which is fairly new.
I tell a lot of people this, especially folks who are coming up, that editing is one of the best ways to get into the industry, because once you learn that skill, you learn a very critical storytelling skill, and that can lead you to directing. You understand what you need as a camera operator. You understand what you need as a producer. Tell me a little bit about how editing kind of led to everything else. And do you agree with me?
I do. I think the key to being, a successful filmmaker is to really deeply understand all the aspects of filmmaking. And I see filmmaking, I really see it as it's a cooperative effort, right? Every single person is important, right? And without anyone, we're talking about, and it can be very hierarchical, but I don't believe in that. Like, everyone's contribution, particularly in independent film, is so critical, So I think, for me, the editing, and again, I'm biased because it was an editor. Editing is, it's the end of the line, right? It can either make or break the film. Editors have a bad rap of often being the naysayers of people to bring the bad news of guess what, you're missing this, or you're missing that. But I think it's very different with scripted. Really, with narrative or in scripted film, the script is critical, right? It's the genesis of everything. And ultimately, a film it's as good as the script. The editing can do much, but you have a limited amount of footage, and you have sort of limitations to how the story can be told because of, the script. Documentary, the editor, I feel like is really has the role of being oftentimes a co-director. And I think this is something that, because documentary is so different and so much, there can be a lot of pre-planning, but when you're dealing with real people and real lives, and, you can script out stuff in the beginning if it's historical, but the edit just changes everything. A documentary film is often really made in the edit. So to me, and I have worked with people in that way where, that some of the, it's like, I will handle post, my part of the direction will be post, and they will, someone has better skills in the field, but I'm better at post. And sometimes if we co-direct, we'll divide it that way, just because for docs, it is so challenging to do all of it, and then to also just to remain, to not become inured, and docs often take a long time. I feel like editing does do so much, for someone. If they have that skill, it can really lead to, to better decisions down the road. Like Sam Pollard, again, was an editor. So I was an editor. So many folks I know who have that. And if you look at even Honora, Sean Baker edited it. And so it's you know what I mean? There is something really important about it.
Absolutely. It's my biggest regret is that I didn't start out as an editor. I absolutely regret it. And that's why I tell everybody, gotta learn to edit. All right. Eyes on the Prize 3. I have to admit, I was ignorant that there was this incredibly important series that came before it. Can you set up, this great civil rights series of of documentary films that's your series, along with, Don Porter is the executive producer, and you have other great filmmakers who are contributing to this. Can you set up kind of what this is on the whole, and how what's airing now on Max is kind of a continuation of something that started a while back?
Sure. So basically, Henry Hampton, who had Blackside Productions, there was actually, before We're Eyes on the Prize 3, so Don Porter's company, Trilogy Films, produced, and Don was the showrunner for this series, which is currently playing on HBO Max. Before this, there was an Eyes on the Prize, and it was one. It wasn't labeled such, but there was Eyes on the Prize. And then there was Eyes on the Prize 2. And Henry Hampton was the creator and sort of the showrunner, if you will, or just the visionary behind these series. And they document the civil rights movement from the late 50s, early 60s through the last iteration, which was Eyes on the Prize 2, ends in 1984. So Sam Pollard, my mentor, worked on the second season of Eyes on the Prize, but they detail chronologically sort of the achievements of the civil rights movement in the country. And it was, so for us to be able to work on Eyes on the Prize 3, and this is an award-winning series. I mean, this is the brand of Eyes on the Prize plus the 2 seasons that came before were the seminal documentary series on these issues and this incredibly important piece of American history. So to be able to work on it with the team that I had, again, we had Don Porter, there was a number of other directors, Asako Glasgow, Rudy Valdez, Smriti Mundra, Muta Ali, and Samantha Knowles, who's also someone who I am blessed to be her mentor, to work with them and just, again, on this series that we did not think we would be at the time when we were working on it, which was about 2-3 years, started 3 years ago. We didn't know exactly where we were headed, but it's so critical, and it is hopeful and inspiring. And I think I really hope for viewers who get to watch it, it will be a guidebook, sort of a guide for what to do now and in the future. Like, when we look back at folks who overcame impossible odds, it really makes one believe that what we can do it now, we can do it again.
Tell me a little bit about your episode, what you focused on, and kind of like the structure, how your episode fits into the whole scheme of things.
Sure. So my episode starts in 1977, and it's called America, Don't Look Away. And basically, we start in each episode deals with a certain topic. So my episode is about housing inequity and inequality and the fight for justice in that arena, and then also healthcare. And then the other episodes focus on other issues that were impacting communities during those time periods. So we have episode 2 talks about policing. There's policing and incarceration. And so on, right? There's sort of topical. There's environmental justice, et cetera, et cetera. So my episode begins in the Bronx in the late 70s when literally buildings were being burned to the ground. You had a predominantly Black and Latinx community living in the Bronx, a vulnerable community. And when I say vulnerable, I mean economically vulnerable community, and landlords were having their buildings burnt to the ground to collect insurance money. And again, it was putting people's lives in incredible danger. It was this terribly fraudulent criminal activity that was ongoing, and it seemed impossible to stop it. And a community called Banana Kelly came together. They named themselves Banana Kelly for the streets, the cross-section of streets that they were reclaiming, came together to reclaim some of these abandoned buildings and turn them into cooperative housing. And they fought back against the system to rebuild their neighborhood, rebuild their community, and empower themselves. Eyes on the Prize, it was really important to us to share the stories of unsung heroes. Again, these are ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And the theme is really that no one is coming to save us. We have to save ourselves. There is no hero is riding in on a horse. The government is not going to do it. So we're going to do it for ourselves. So that is the story of Banana Kelly, which is featured. And then we have another incredible organizer whose name was Dr. Rashida, and her organization was called Babashi. It still exists today. Both Banana Kelly and Babashi exist today. And Babashi was formed to essentially on the forefront of the AIDS crisis, and where Black and brown men, gay men, were dying, were incredibly marginalized, but also dying at a rate that was just staggering, and were not receiving resources and care the way that they should have. Again, the entire gay community was marginalized, but white gay men were able to mobilize, just having more resources available to them within their own community, and fight back in a way that Black and brown men were not. And they were the sort of the most marginalized, the most neglected community, and the most vulnerable. And Dr. Rashida, who is a Muslim woman and she wears full garb, was on the front line of that fight, organizing for intravenous drug users, and basically speaking out for a community whose voice was just being silenced at that time, and who were being devastated by the disease. And again, a fearless fighter in the face of healthcare inequity. So episode 1 covers those topics. And again, we're in New York and we're in Philadelphia.
As you're telling me about this, I can't help but ask, like, are there takeaways from what happened then that we can actually, as there's attacks on the LGBTQ plus community today, are there things, and healthcare, are there things that you saw that were happening then that maybe we can take today?
100%. I think, and it feels like we are back today in that time period with people's literally like civil, human, all rights were being taken away. And back then there were none. There were essentially the LGBTQ community faced the most oppression, the most marginalized, the most under threat, and that here we are again, But I think in some ways what this shows is that back then, like, again, progress is being stripped away, but we have fought it before. We can fight it again. We will continue to fight. And it's the same with when you look at women's healthcare. Like, it's like the fact that we have to keep continuing to fight the same battles over and over again is ridiculous. But democracy, what I've learned is democracy is really like a garden, and weeds will encroach. And in the sense that, there will always be something, and it's something that has to be constantly tended to, and that we have to be constantly vigilant, unfortunately. Like, there will always be sectors of society that want to deny certain communities their rights. When it is the most dangerous is when the government endorses it, when the government is doing it, right? And so we are there right now. And so that is where it is a full-on battle. And I think we have to look back at what our elders did and the people who came before us and not fail them. I mean, this is really how I feel, not fail the future generations, but also not fail them. They paved the way, so we can't let their work, we just can't let all their work be destroyed.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough to kind of keep up the positive attitude. Yes.
Exhausting.
All right.
It's exhausting.
Yeah.
There's no positive. That's not positive attitude, but it's now life and death. And back then it was life and death. It's life and death for trans people. It's life and death for the LGBTQ community. It's life and death. Like, DEI includes women. Like, women, 50% of the population are seen as DEI. Like, how is that even a thing? You know what I mean? So I don't think everyone is weary, and I don't know that there's a positive. It's not a positive attitude. It's a put on your boxing gloves attitude. Like, we don't have a choice, and that's what our ancestors did. So here we go. We do it again.
Yeah, it's a great way to look at it. Okay, I want to ask about The Perfect Neighbor. I mean, again, you're taking a very tough subject matter. We're in Florida here. This is the stand your ground law. I mean, we're back here. It was 2012 when Trayvon Martin was murdered, and we were talking about stand your ground. Florida had this law back in, I think they started it in 2005. And so it's 2025, this murder of, I think her name, AJ Owens, it was in 2022. And so tell me a little bit about, you said this was a very personal story for you. So talk to me a little bit about this film and why you chose to take this on.
Sure. So Ajika Owens was a young mother, 34. She was a young mother of four, and she was a very dear friend of my sister-in-law, who also lives, in community with her in Florida. And there had been an ongoing dispute with Susan Lawrence, who is a neighbor who moved in about 2 years prior to the incident in which Ajika was shot and killed. When it happened, which, as you mentioned, was in June of 20, was it June of 2023? June of 2023. When it happened, my family was was immediately notified. And I have two incredible sister-in-laws. One, it lives in Jamaica and is an activist and an incredible organizer. And she flew in. She came somehow she ended up in New York with us before going to Florida. This is me and my partner, who's also a producer on the film, Nakan Kwantu. So we were on basically, and my husband, my partner, Nakan Kwantu, went with her because he was like, you shouldn't go alone. I'll go with you, with his sister Takima. And so they were on the ground from day one trying to organize. And we really didn't we didn't know what we were doing other than trying to support the family. And also we were really deeply concerned, as you said, having had the incidents that occurred prior, Trayvon Martin, et cetera, we were really worried that Susan would walk. The stand your ground being so prevalent, the gun culture being what it is. Again, Susan Lawrence was a white woman, an older white woman, Ajika Owens was Black. So we were originally just trying to activate, to organize, and to bring attention to the case, to put pressure, because Susan was not arrested for about 4 days after. We thought she would maybe fly to Mexico, like that we would, she'd be gone. So we wanted to bring media presence and pressure to law enforcement to act. And Susan was eventually arrested, but then it was a year. Her trial was last November. Her trial was last August. And then August of 2024, the trial. Then November of 2024, the sentencing. So again, we didn't know if she'd get 5 years. It's been an ongoing thing we were essentially trying to keep this story alive in the media, because things disappear so quickly. And unfortunately, there's so many shootings, there's so many gun murders that you never know. But then what happened about 2 months after the shooting, after Ajika was killed, Attorney Benjamin Crump's team came on board, and we were working with one of his lawyers, Anthony Thomas, who's an incredible lawyer, but also just, this is his life's work, he's a civil rights lawyer. And they did a FOIA request. Essentially, they sued the police department, and all this footage was released, this body cam footage. And it turned out that it led basically, there was 2 years worth of footage that led up to the incident. And when we saw that, originally we were going through it to try to maybe pull out pieces for the media, or to just see how it could be used. I think that's when we realized there was a film, because you never see the before of incidents like this. You always see the aftermath, and we are almost inured to the aftermath, the grieving family, the trial, all that. There's shootings in this country every day, but you don't see a community. And it's also, Ajika lived in this really beautiful community and it had this really powerful network where they cared for each other, took care of each other's children. It was a community of families. And Susan was this outlier, and she was a threat for 2 years, but was not really seen as such by law enforcement. I think the children understood how dangerous she was, but they did not. She should never have had access to a gun. Her access to a gun ruined her life and ruined so many lives in that community. So I think we made the film. It was partly grief work. Honestly, I realized afterwards, someone said that to me at Sundance. They said, "Oh, this is grief work," because we were trying to understand what happened, and it was helpful to take the pain and turn it into purpose. But also, the hope is, with any time we make these things, like with Eyes on the Prize, like with anything I work on, that as people see this, that it might change the way they think about these laws, that it might, if they can see the devastating impact that this really has, which I fear that we are just used to it. Like I said, we are just inured, like we are not that concerned. But if they can see it firsthand, they can see what the community was before, who Ajika was before, who the children were, and then what happens after. I think my thought is that our hope was that it could impact change. And I also really made the film because I have no other skills, and I wanted to support the family. And I thought, if I made this film and sold it, if someone would buy it, we could give the money to the family. Like we could give them something, because we are not, people who have otherwise, a lot of money kicking around to just, like I'm not a billionaire. But it was a way too to see if we could do something for them. So it's been particularly meaningful to have the really warm and kind and just beautiful reception we've had. And that's where we are. We're now doing the festival circuit with the film.
That's great. And I want to ask you about kind of the reception, like you said, because obviously Second Amendment, standing your ground, that can be a polarizing topic for a lot of folks. How have people reacted to the film thus far?
I think Sundance, it was a very warm reception. And then what was interesting though is at Sundance there are the screenings that are within all, the sort of city or town of Sundance that are mostly film people. And then there's also screenings in Salt Lake City where folks who are not necessarily film industry people they come to those. And I have to say the Salt Lake City screening was in a way that it was a sort of a test of like, how will an audience who's doesn't work in film receive this? And how will it impact them? And I have to say it was the most powerful screening for us, because the audience just was immediately like, what can we do? How can we help? And they were not interested in talking to the film team. They only, the family, Ajika's family, was that her mother, Pamela Diaz, who's like the bravest, again, just the bravest person I know, was there with us. And all anyone wanted to do was talk to her and to the family, my sister-in-laws, who are the family, considered the family, and say, what can we do? How can we help? How are the kids? Like, how can we change this? And that, to me, is what, again, like, that is how things happen. Being a documentary filmmaker who makes social justice films is always an exercise in optimism, that you're like, you have to believe that an audience is going to, respond or is going to, and I've never been disappointed. I've never been disappointed with audiences that see this kind of work, because we're human beings, we connect, there's empathy. So it was, like I said, the Salt Lake screening was in a way the best, in my opinion, the most meaningful one that we have had so far.
Sometimes it's easy to get focused on the issue as opposed to these characters. Can you talk to me a little bit about making sure you have that nice balance between you're developing the family characters, or even I hate to use the word villains, but the opposition, the adversary versus your main characters, as well as we're focusing on this stand your ground versus the police and how they're, what they're doing. Tell me a little bit about how you balance that out, issues as well as characters.
Sure. So I think with this film, it's not entirely, but it's like 95% police body cam footage. So it plays like, it's verite, it plays like, in some ways it plays like a narrative, which is what I think to me makes the footage was so extraordinary, and that the police unwittingly, and we really wanted to also, the police unwittingly, function kind of as multicam. They were in there talking to different people and sort of, called back into the neighborhood many times, to a point where the community was used to them. They were trying to exercise community policing, but they were not equipped to really see, the threat that was there. I think But we purposely wanted to keep people embedded in that world. We do not have any interviews. There's no experts. It's all detective interviews with the community. And if there is anybody interspersed, detective interviews with the community, and then the footage. So it's an exercise in show and not tell, which I think is really critical in documentaries. It's, again, and we wanted to subvert the use of police body cam footage, which is often used to surveil vulnerable communities and communities of color, right? It's used to protect the police. But in this way, what I don't think they unwittingly caught was this beautiful community beforehand and who they were and all the children playing and like how they took care of each other and how, you know what I mean? And it really becomes very clear, at least it was clear to us, that, again, this was like a lovely space where Susan was just an encroaching threat. I think we tried very hard not to be heavy-handed. You know, I think for people, they were allowed to just live the story and not be told what they should think and feel, which is, you know, I think been part of the positive response.
So you now have kind of had a wide variety from a storytelling perspective, you know, Eyes on the Prize is a very different kind of, you know, archival looking back. The Synanon doc, also a lot of archive. This is obviously, the body cam is a very distinct style. Talk to me a little bit about kind of being versatile and being able to utilize all these different kinds of styles and how that affects your storytelling abilities.
Sure. So I think for me, the main thing is really like ultimately, whatever tools you have, it's about the most compelling story. It's about an angle into something that makes people think about it differently, you know, that sheds a different kind of light. And I think that's how you reach people. One of my favorite projects that I ever did was a short that was on the New York Times called A Conversation with My Black Son. And it was about how families have to have a conversation with their children if you are raising a Black child about the police, that are often very different from a conversation that might happen in the house of a white family. This was long, you know, I think around the time the Black Lives Matter movement, or around that time that it came out. But it was sort of like a conversation that it was a way of getting into the topic that I think people hadn't thought about. We were at that time being browbeaten with news about the police. But it's like, if finding the universality in a story, I think, is really critical. Like that story, what made it so simple is it was just about parents and children. And like every parent wants their child to be safe. There is nothing else, right? Like we all have that, no matter where we come from in the world. And I think that was the sort of the hook to get people to think about this differently. Like, well, maybe in your house, this might happen, but in my house, this is how we have to talk about the cops. And this is what I fear. The cops are actually a threat to my children, you know, or to my son, who is 7, but in a few years will be 13. And, you know, I'm worried his life will be in danger. So I think with all the storytelling that I do, it's like my interest is in how do we do something? How do we look at this in a way that can open the door for anyone, you know, to see how do we shed light on something in a new way, or that can make them to connect, or can get them to connect. Because I think ultimately that's the key to any story, is the connection, right? To a story to be good is the connection that your audience feels with whoever they are seeing on screen, or whatever they are seeing on screen. So that, I think, film is ultimately one of the best forms of communication if done well. We are emotional beings, so that's the question for me, you know, is how does that happen? And so that's the through line through all the styles, because the styles, the whatever, you know, that's kind of the frosting on the cake. The cake is that. How do you make that connection?
All right, so you're now taking The Perfect Neighbor all around on these wonderful festivals. I had to ask, you know, I've read a lot about how Sundance isn't the same anymore, people lamenting about the fall of Sundance, but, you know, I had Emily Cassie and Julian Brave Noisecat, who brought Sugarcane to Sundance and just were at the Oscars. They didn't win, but the Sugarcane went on a wonderful festival run, and their film was bought shortly after Sundance. And you're now going through this. Do you feel like the festival circuit is still, the way to go if you have an independent film?
I think it is one of the only ways, unfortunately, for an independent film at this time. I think buyers are not buying the way that they did before. The ecosystem has drastically changed since 2024. They feel they were oversaturated, they've overspent. The streaming model has not worked the way they thought that it would. And I think that there's so many cutbacks that going directly to the buyer, and trying to sell something feels almost impossible, particularly trying to pre-sell something. Again, there's only certain genres that are being bought, which are true crime, celebrity, maybe sports.
And sports.
If we're lucky, but those are kind of it. Even music is sort of being sidelined. So music is very specific, maybe not, but it has to be something that they feel very sure will sell. Again, we saw Anora, a $6 million indie film, win the Oscars, like sweep the Oscars. However you feel about the film, that is undeniable. So I think this and that, like, again, Sean Baker's career was built in festivals back, there's like he was at Rooftop Films one year here in New York, so I think I do believe that we have to build power on our own. Like, we have to continue to do that work. And this is how it used to be. There was a time when it was like, I'd say I've been around long enough to see it. So to see the rise and fall and all that. And it's like, but it's always about keeping power within our infrastructures. Like, the film festivals are, really belong to us, and should belong to us. I mean, they're obviously facing a lot of challenges, but we have to claim them. We have to claim that space. We have to build our own table. And I think it's like, if we can do that, and they'll come. I still think there's a lot of work to be figured out with distribution. And I think there's a lot of people smarter than I am at that sort of thing, doing that, working on that. But because the monopoly of the streamer is terrible. It is devastating. Because, again, you might create a film. Will you get it sold? Who knows? But I think festivals are not the problem. It's the distribution model, So I think we have to continue to support them.
All right. So last question, as somebody who's, you've been commissioned, you've got your independent film, you've done it all. What kind of advice do you have for a young filmmaker who maybe is working on their first documentary?
Sure. So I think don't quit your day job. 2, grants, apply for grants. 3, mentorship. 4, join organizations. There's a lot of organizations out there that are specific to, again, power building and community building. There's, and some of them, again, are affinity based, or, but there's ADOC, there's Brown Girls Doc Mafia, there's BDC, the Black Documentary Collective, there's the Queer Producers Alliance, there's the Undocumented Filmmakers. Forgive me, I may be saying some of the names wrong, but there's there is a organization for undocumented filmmakers. But there's Film Fatales, there's Women in Film. There's so many organizations that, and then there's even ones that are specific to certain regions of the world. So join the community, right? I think that's really important. A huge piece of it is be active, and so and we need each other. We need community right now. So we network, we come together we rise. The same sort of pieces that work to build community activism, it's the same. We have to do the same things. And we also have to come together to support each other, work on each other's films. Again, some people barter, I'll edit this for you if you shoot this for me. We have to figure out ways to work together and buy into the festivals, buy into, again, don't look to them to save us. It's the same message. They will not save us. We have to save ourselves, So I think that's what it is for independent film. And it always has been, really. It always has been. And for filmmakers who are marginalized, like filmmakers of color, women, queer filmmakers, it's not different. We've never been in the room. We've some of us have maybe make it in the room, but not everybody. So like, what's new? Just have to keep doing the same things.
All excellent advice. GEETA GANDBHIR. You've got Eyes on the Prize 3, which is on Max. It's streaming now. Everybody should see that. And good luck the rest of the festival run with The Perfect Neighbor. Thank you so much for doing No Script, No Problem.
Thank you for having me.
All right, it is time for your reality check. First up, let's talk about some of the best TV out right now. Adolescence. It continues to dominate the Netflix top 10. The 4-part miniseries out of the UK is more popular than any of the new stuff from Shonda Rhimes, Robert De Niro, or Mindy Kaling. In the days since its March 13th release, Adolescence, about a 13-year-old boy who is suspected of killing a girl from his school after potentially being exposed to misogynistic ideas online, has become Netflix's latest hit. According to the streamer, it is the most watched show on the platform in dozens of countries, including right here in the United States. In Britain, the show has reignited discussions about whether the government should restrict children's access to smartphones to stop them from accessing harmful content, i.e., stuff coming from the manosphere. I would argue here in the States, the conversation has revolved mostly around the stunning cinematography, brilliant acting, fantastic directing, and innovative one-take episodes. And that's all fine and good. Everybody involved deserves plenty of accolades. However, I do think Adolescence should cause some conversation here in the United States about what young males are going through and some of the issues that they are facing. Multiple articles in the UK have been published about Adolescence, and co-creator and star Stephen Graham has been featured in various media interviews talking not just about the series from a TV perspective, but about the problems that young men are facing that are addressed in the series.
I've read an incident in the paper, and it was about a young boy killing a young girl, stabbing a young girl to death. And then not long after that, I saw on the news on the television that, it happened again in a completely different part of the country. And a young boy had stabbed a young girl. And if I'm really honest with you, both of those incidents really hurt my heart in a way. And it just made me think, what's going on? Why? What's happened in today's society where a young boy, and they are young boys, feel a need or this urge or whatever it may be, I'll never understand it, to kill a young girl, to stab a young girl to death. And I knew we were going to be making a series, so I said to Phil, this is the idea I'd like us to focus on.
A Times of London headline called it the TV drama that every parent should watch. In Britain's Parliament, too, lawmakers have used the show to make political points. Prime Minister Keir Starmer told the House of Commons that he was watching Adolescence with his 2 kids and said that action was needed to address the fatal consequences of young men and boys viewing harmful content online. I fear, however, that in the States, we're missing out on an important opportunity to address the issue of struggling young men, and that is an essential topic that we need to be discussing. It's complicated, but it really can't be something that we continue to kick down the road. Young men are not graduating from high school as often as they used to. They're not graduating from college as often as they used to. They're not going to graduate school, med school, or law school as often as they used to. And sure, it's easy to say, boo-hoo, feel so bad for young men, but I'm sorry, they are more depressed. They're committing suicide at a higher rate than ever before. These are not problems that will just magically go away. They will only get worse unless we as a society address them. I encourage people to read Richard Reeves' book of Boys and Men. He addresses this topic very eloquently, and the research is extensive. This is not a subject that is easy to talk about, but it's something that, unless we address it, it is only going to get worse. All right, enough of all that. On to something much less serious and more fun to talk about. I am, of course, talking about the Severance finale.
Have you finished Cold Harbor?
No.
And she's still alive.
I am still reeling from it weeks later. Mark S., the innie, finally had the convo with his Audi Mark Scout, and it did not go well. We finally learned what Cold Harbor is, and Gemma's life was at stake. So, of course, Audi Mark had to do what any good husband would do, try to save her life, but that put any Mark in a tough spot. He had to choose dying and letting Audi Mark live happily ever after with Gemma, or living an unknown future with his love, Innie Helly. And the season came down to a beautifully, brilliantly acted and directed moment. Ben Stiller and company pulled out all the stops in this finale. You got blood, you got a great fight scene with Mr. Drummond. It was awesome. And in that moment, that heartbreaking, gut-wrenching moment at the door, Gemma, great acting there, just heartbroken. She doesn't realize that that's the Innie Mark who is making the decision to go with Helly. I can't wait for season 3. I want to know what happens to Helly and Mark S. And I want to know what happens to Gemma. Is she now going to try and get Mark S. out of there? What a great season finale. And that's not even the best show on television.
Today was chaos.
Is this kind of thing normal? It's what we do.
If you're not watching The Pit on Max, you are missing out, okay? It's set up like 24, but it's in an ER in Pittsburgh. So each episode is 1 hour in this low budget kind of messy ER, and anything can go wrong. Anyone can walk through the door of this ER, and pretty much you follow these doctors. There's very little music. It is raw. This is pure storytelling excellence. Noah Wiley, who everybody remembers from the show ER, this guy is back and he is better than ever. He's fucking incredible as the attending overseeing the ER, and every doctor and nurse on this show plays their role so well. It is the ultimate ensemble, and it is a game changer in the medical drama genre. I warn you, the active shooter episodes are edge of your seat TV with a docu-style look and feel. It makes you feel really like you are in it. Noah Wiley is making a solid case for an Emmy, folks. The Pit manages to address multiple real-life issues in our country without being preachy, because nobody wants that when you sit down to watch a show. It is character-driven, action-packed, and thought-provoking. Last show I'm talking about is season 3 of White Lotus, which is bonkers. I mean, this thing is crazy. I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall in that writer's room. I have no idea who did the murder yet, but I do know Sam Rockwell should get an Emmy for Best Guest Star. His wild, off-the-wall, insane monologue about wanting to be an Asian girl and then acting like one, and then getting sober, and good God, Walton Goggins' reactions to the monologue, those are unforgettable performances. And then to follow that episode up with the creepy siblings doing some shit that I can't even talk about because it was so disturbing. I mean, that episode was just purely fucked up. I am just blown away by this season of White Lotus. I know some people are critical of it, but I'm just dying to see the finale and find out who gets murdered, who did the murder. I think Mike White has done it again. All right, moving on from stuff I watched to giving some credit where credit is due. Love is Blind, the unscripted dating series, raked in 1.2 billion minutes viewed from February 24th to March 2nd, thanks to season 8, which launched earlier in February. The series came in at number 3 on the streaming charts, marking its 34th appearance in the top 10 and making it the top unscripted streaming show of all time and top streaming original in terms of total appearances on the Nielsen streaming top 10. Yes, that is more popular than Beast Games for a fraction of the budget. If you were wondering, Prime Video's Reacher, with 1.4 billion minutes viewed, was in first place for that time period. Now, while we celebrate Love is Blind, things are still pretty bleak here when it comes to production in Los Angeles. The number of shooting days in LA County decreased by 42% last year compared to 2022. That is according to a recent report. Over that 2-year period from 2022 to 2024, reports say that thousands of full-time jobs have just evaporated, with work moving overseas and out of state, as well as streamers and studios cutting back on spending and cable TV's rapid decline. Rob Lowe recently lamented on his podcast about the loss of production in California.
Why do I shoot my game show, the American Game Show, The Floor in Ireland? It's like,
do you really?
I do.
Whereabouts?
Dublin.
That's interesting that you shoot The Floor there.
It's cheaper to bring 100 American people to Ireland than to walk across the lot at Fox.
Right.
Past the sound stages and do it there.
Crazy. Do you think if we shot Parks right now, we would be in Budapest?
100% we would be. We'd be in Budapest. We would be...
It's so weird. There's nothing shoots in Los Angeles.
Nothing.
Just too expensive to shoot here.
There are no tax credits. So like all those other places are offering 40%.
Yeah.
40%.
Oh, yeah.
And then on top of that, there's other stuff that they do.
Yeah.
And then... Yeah, and that's not even talking about the union stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's just tax economics of it all. So it's criminal what the California and LA have let happen. It's criminal.
Perhaps some lawmakers are finally listening to people like Rob Lowe. California lawmakers are finally moving to increase the payout to subsidized film and TV productions in the Los Angeles area to 35%, while expanding the range of productions that qualify. But is it too little, too late? The current program provides a credit of 20% or 25% to live action films and scripted TV shows. Under legislative language submitted last week, eligibility would be expanded to animated films and TV shows, sitcoms, and large-scale competition shows. Now, I'm not sure what constitutes a large-scale competition show. Does that mean Wipeout, The Voice, Masked Singer, The Bachelor, Hell's Kitchen, MasterChef? All of those involve competitions. They all have big footprints, large budgets, and in my humble opinion, they should all be very worthy of tax credits. Governor Gavin Newsom took a break from his podcast and promised to increase the program from $330 million per year to $750 million as the state's production workforce struggles with a severe downturn. A bill, SB 630, was introduced last month to implement the increase. The Motion Picture Association has also argued that the program needs to become more generous on a per-project basis to compete with other states. California's two largest competitors, Georgia and New York, offer 30% rebates and include among eligible costs the above-the-line salaries of actors, directors, producers, and writers. The current program limits TV shows to those with episodes of at least 40 minutes, excluding sitcoms and other half-hour shows. If approved, SB 630 would lower the threshold to 20 minutes, allowing sitcoms to qualify. The program would also become eligible to animated films, shows, and shorts with a minimum budget of at least $1 million. The bill would also allow large-scale competition shows to qualify, also with a minimum budget of $1 million, though it would not include game shows, reality shows, talk shows, or documentaries. In my humble opinion, that is stupid, and it is exactly what Rob Lowe was talking about on his podcast. Game shows have historically been shot on LA studio lots. They should all have tax credits in order to keep them here, not be sent to Ireland like Fox is doing. It is ludicrous. It employs lots of people here in Los Angeles. Keep them here. We are losing jobs. It is a no-brainer. All right, that's going to do it for another episode of No Script, No Problem. Please remember to take a look at the show notes. If you have the ability to donate to any of the GoFundMes that will help folks affected by the LA fires and some of the other causes, please do. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe, download, and rate it with 5 stars. It's available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon Podcast, Stitcher, and TuneIn. You can also find it at Believe.com and at Believe Podcast. Follow me on social media. I'm on Blue Sky, Instagram, LinkedIn, Mastodon, Snapchat, Threads, and Facebook. You can also send me some questions if you have them. I'm at noscriptnoproblempodcast@gmail.com. And if you're interested in advertising on the show, please contact Believe@Believe.com. Thanks for listening. Until next time, I'm Steve Berkowitz for No Script, No Problem.